voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer.
So Max, I listed your very impressive credentials.
Thanks for the nice build-up.
And your very American-sounding name.
Yes.
Because you began that essay by saying, people who know you professionally, and know your books, know your writing, know your appearances, they think of you as a regular all-American guy. But in fact, you came to America when you were 6 years old as a Russian immigrant who couldn't speak a word of English.
Correct. And I thought I'd done a reasonably good job of assimilating. I don't have an accent. There's no obvious tip-off that I wasn't born around these parts. But the essay that I wrote was really about the fact that Donald Trump is making me feel like a foreigner for the first time in my life, and what I have always thought of as my very own country. But he's making me feel like an outsider, a Russian, a Jew, an immigrant, anything but kind of a normal mainstream American, because of the way that he is dividing us and balkanizing us and seems to be catering to this white nationalist agenda. And it's especially chilling to hear people like Steve Bannon and Steve Miller, with Bannon having been one of the most influential people in the White House and Miller's still there, and they're saying, we're not a nation of immigrants. I mean, Miller is repudiating the Emma Lazarus poem on the base of the Statue of Liberty about give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. They're saying, no, that's not what we're about. Well, I beg to differ. This is the country that I've known. This is the country I think most of us have known. And this, in fact, is what America has been about for well over 200 years. And it seems to me that these guys, with Donald Trump's acquiescence and sometimes active support, are bent on this very radical project of redefining American identity in these white nationalist terms, which I think are very threatening to everybody. It should be threatening to everybody. Even if you're actually a WASP, you should be threatened by this, but I think it's doubly threatening if you're not a WASP.
It is Monday, December 4th of 2017, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We are now open. And we have a daily special. It's Monday, so it's River City Hash Monday. That's right, folks. We are going to have a daily special every day of the week. And we're so happy that you stopped by today for River City Hash Monday. Thought we'd start off a little bit with Max Boot telling Fareed Zakaria that Trump is making him feel like a foreigner in his own country. Now, I don't want to belabor Max Boot's experience too much, but he's laying it at the feet of Trumpism, when in actuality, and we all know, this is republicanism. They have spent decades throwing this meme out of the other. And I am sorry that now Max Boot is a part of it. It's the old saying from that reverend, that Lutheran reverend. You know, they came for, the Jews. I wasn't a Jew. I didn't do anything. And now Max Boot knows exactly what the hell is going on. All right, what other hors d'oeuvres, amuse-bouche, can we offer up before we get to the main menu here at the Front Cafe? Well, it looks like Joy Reid has apologized for, accusing, she called him Miss Charlie Crist for being a closeted gay man. That was, I believe, back in, when was this? Hold on just one moment. There we go. Okay. This was in blog posts back in 2007, 2009. So Charlie Crist did accept her apology, was rather effusive about it, said, totally forgotten, you're a great reporter, keep it up. So the timing, not only is it because Joy Reid is a black woman, because black women and men, and people of color generally, women mostly, have been attacked in the most vile way whenever they speak up. And but this timing of this and some other instances where it seems that whoever they are taking deep dives into the past of anybody who, like a Joy Reid, or really anybody who has a critique of the current administration. And I don't know. My antenna is up, and it sure sounds Cyrillic to me. But when you're speaking of active measures, they can be anything now. Let's see, what else? NASA has released stunning new images of Jupiter, and I'll post a link to that in the show notes. So take a look at that. Man, so beautiful. But when you realize why it's so beautiful, what it is that makes it beautiful, yeah, it's damn scary. The universe, wow. Trump is facing possible testimony in the sexual harassment case that Summer Zervos is filing against him, and his answers could lead to impeachment. And former President Bill Clinton was compelled to give testimony in a suit filed by Paula Jones, which was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1997, and his prevarications led to impeachment proceedings. Well, actually, hearings. But this is different. He was a Democrat, and Trump is Trump. He's the whole Republican Party. They're not... You really think they're going to have a hearing, an impeachment hearing for this guy? Huh. And what's up with Grassley? Grassley says that working people, they don't deserve a tax cut because they would just go spend their money on booze, women, and movies. What the hell? Have you seen Grassley? That roomy-eyed, puffy-faced, red-nosed, funny guy? That Grassley? I'm telling you, he looks like a drunk intern ass pincher watching movies on the taxpayer dime. They project. They always project. Trump suggests that Hillary Clinton should be prosecuted for lying to the FBI. What? Let's see, this one's short. Before boarding Marine One for a trip to Salt Lake City, where he will meet with leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also because he's trying to kick Romney off of any ticket and get rid of him. Yeah, I guess they have a problem. Trump argued that retired General Michael Flynn is charged with lying to the FBI, but that Hillary Clinton also lied to the FBI and was never held accountable. You know, the most investigated woman running for office in the history of the United States. Trump touted the rise in the stock market following the GOP's tax bill that cut taxes on those making over $1 million annually. According to him, the only thing that hurts the markets are when networks spread fake news. Like this guy never does. Trump was presumably referencing the guilty plea for Flynn, which resulted in a market drop on Friday. I feel badly for General Flynn. I feel very badly, Trump told reporters. He's led a very strong life, and I feel badly, very badly for John. I will say this, Hillary Clinton lied many times to the FBI, and nothing happened to her. General Flynn lied, and they destroyed his life. Hillary Clinton, on the 4th of July weekend, went to the FBI, not under oath. It was the most incredible thing anyone has ever seen. She lied many times. Nothing happened to her. Flynn lied, and it's like they ruined his life. It's very unfair because the guy is a traitor. And I suppose a traitor would not recognize another traitor. They just seem like patriots. Now, of course, there's no proof of Clinton lying to the FBI. And the comments from Trump are only his personal opinion on the matter. We have to have those sorts of qualifications now. Because it looks like Trump's lawyer says the president can't obstruct justice because he's the president. Can you believe that? Yeah, well, John Dowd, the president's outside lawyer, insisted he drafted Trump's tweet over the weekend that seemingly confessed to obstruction, but argued the social media posting did no such thing. Tweet said, the tweet did not admit obstruction. That is an ignorant and arrogant assertion. You mean ignorant and arrogant by every single lawyer. Okay. Yep. President cannot obstruct justice because he is the chief law enforcement officer under the Constitution's Article 2 and has every right to express his view of any case. Is this guy that dense? Is he that droll? Does he not remember what happened to Nixon and Nixon mucking up the Charles Manson case? Please. All right, a couple more hors d'oeuvres here to whet our appetite. Looks like Trump wants to shrink Utah monuments, riling tribes and environmentalists. The U.S. Appeals Court is to consider the legality of Trump's latest travel ban. And, of course, Trump tries to block Mitt Romney from becoming Utah senator. Let's take a look at that real quick. And since he wants Hillary investigated for her while he's on his way to Utah. Well, we'll see if there is any Trump effect on this. I'm not sure if Utah and Utah Mormons in particular are happy with Bush. A high-tech suicide machine makes death a painless, peaceful, optimal way to go. I will say that I'm not against people who have chosen to have assisted suicide because of medical issues where great pain is involved. But the commodity, making it into a commodity, making money off of apparatus seems unseemly, like in Soylent Green. So, very interesting. Trump supporters are dismayed by a tax plan that caters to the rich and leaves them behind. But as long as they can kick black and brown people, it'll be okay. Trust me. That's all they really voted for him. All right. Well, on the rest of the menu today, I should mention that we do have more items on the menu. It's not just River City Hash Monday. Oh, well, it is. But on the rest of the menu, we'll examine how a Vermont resident of a retirement community made ricin and then tested the poison on her neighbors. In a deal that would further consolidate the U.S. healthcare industry, CVS Health Corp plans to buy Aetna Inc. for $69 billion. And the Trump administration's betrayal of American values stops for nothing. Not even a hurricane. Ooh. And after the break, we will move to the chef's table for a discussion on how novelist Joan Didion's disillusionment with her own story and family narrative positioned her especially well to see through the self-deceptions of others. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. All right. Well, I should mention here at the top also is that if you go to netrootsradio.com, of course that is our homepage, you'll notice the fabulous player at the top, and then as you scroll down, you'll notice some other great things, and at the bottom of the homepage, to the right of the homepage, are the Contribute Donate buttons. We are still relying upon you folks to help us pay the bills, and your generosity is helping us do that. Thank you very much. To the leftish, the rightish are the is the chat room link. What am I talking about? The chat room link. And Roaring Girl monitors that throughout the day. And to the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of the homepage are those Contribute Donate buttons. Also, another way to get a hold of me is at Justice Putnam on Twitter. And you can also get a hold of me at Daily Coz, and you can Coz mail me there. But I don't want to say I live on Twitter because I do have a life, but that's the one that I am monitoring and ranting on the most. So get a hold of me there if you would like, and I would like that. And also, I am working on getting an appropriate platform in which to get the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy podcasts up and running. So please be patient. I will have those available soon. All of them will be available as soon as I find the platform and post them. So once again, thank you so much for your patience on that, folks. All right, let's get into these first stories here in the front cafe. And did you like that little hors d'oeuvre with Max Boot? I'm probably going to use that production conceit for the start of all of our shows. And a little hors d'oeuvre, a little amuse-bouche to start the hour off. All right. A Vermont resident. She wanted to do herself in, but she thought, before, maybe I should test it. I don't know. She's just using the scientific method, I suppose, if you're going to go to the trouble of making ricin. This is out of Newsweek by Maria Perez. A Vermont resident of a retirement community made ricin and tested the poison on her neighbors by putting it in their foods and drinks over a period of weeks, according to investigators. Betty Miller, age 70, told an FBI agent that she wanted to injure herself and was testing the effectiveness of the deadly toxin on other residents living in West Robin Senior Living Facility in Shelburne, Vermont, according to a criminal complaint that was filed in federal court. Miller said she harvested 30 to 40 castor beans from plants growing on Wake Robin's property. I see a lawsuit there now. And made 2 to 3 tablespoons of ricin twice in her kitchen. She exposed other residents to the ricin on at least 3 occasions. Authorities were called to the senior facility after Miller told healthcare providers that she had made the ricin and placed it in other residents' food and beverages. The FBI and Vermont Department of Health both interviewed Miller at the University Vermont Medical Center, and the health department said they became aware of one person who most likely fell ill with ricin poisoning, but said no one is currently sick. Officials at the senior center did say that the resident of the apartment in question, this is their statement, the resident of the apartment in question is now involved with the criminal justice system and will not be returning to Wake Robin. Well, I hope not. Investigators found a pill bottle half filled with powder labeled as ricin in a basket in the kitchen cabinet of Miller's apartment, along with other pill bottles labeled as apple seed, cherry seed, and yew seed. And the powder tested positive for ricin. Miller was placed in custody and is scheduled to be in court again on Wednesday. She could be charged with unregistered possession of ricin and, if convicted, could face up to 5 years in prison. If inhaled, ricin causes difficulty breathing and other symptoms like tightness in the chest and nausea. If the deadly drug is ingested, symptoms include vomiting, diarrhea, hallucinations, and seizures. Initial symptoms of ricin poisoning are most likely to occur within 4 to 10 hours of exposure. All right, this next article is out of the Los Angeles Times by James F. Peltz. CVS Health Corp reportedly plans to buy Aetna Inc. for $69 billion in a deal that would further consolidate the U.S. healthcare industry by combining one of the nation's largest pharmacy chains with a major health insurer. CVS, which operates 9,700 drugstores and 1,100 walk-in healthcare clinics, agreed to pay $207 a share, $145 in cash and $62 in CVS stock for Aetna. And that was according to the Washington Post and other media reports that cited unidentified sources. A CVS purchase of Aetna would require clearance by federal antitrust regulators, and approval is by no means certain, especially now because we don't know if Trump is mad at either CVS or Aetna. And if he is, well, then he's going to ask his Justice Department to give him some trouble. Representatives of CVS and Aetna, which insures, that's Aetna, of course, insures 22 million people, could not be reached for comment. Most likely because this announcement or this report came out late last night. And I think people were probably asleep. For consumers, the deal would be the latest example of how the sale of drugs and other healthcare supplies, patient treatment, and medical insurance are being consolidated under one roof. Well, that's for convenience, don't you know? For the companies, the deal is seen helping them mine new areas of sale growth and, in the case of CVS, fend off a potential threat to its pharmacy business by Amazon.com, which is considering a move into the pharmaceuticals business. Now, adding Aetna's membership to CVS's business also could give CVS more leverage in negotiating for lower drug prices with manufacturers. Well, I thought that was illegal. I thought they weren't... Oh, that's only negotiating from overseas. We'll see if CVS can do that. Aetna, meanwhile, would use the CVS deal to move past its scuttled plans to acquire rival insurer Humana Inc., and to keep pace with United Health Group, the nation's largest health insurer. And I'm thinking that Donnie likes United Health Group, so I don't think this sale is going to go through. But that's just me. This last item on the menu here at the Front Cafe is out of Share Blue Media by Timothy Christopher. Donald Trump did not exactly distinguish himself during this year's hurricane season, but months later, his performance somehow managed to get worse. Even as Puerto Rico continues to suffer the after effects of Hurricane Maria's devastation and the White House's abominable responses, new reporting lay bare the Trump administration's disgraceful conduct in the run-up to Hurricane Irma's landfall in Florida. Prior to that deadly storm's arrival, Trump's Department of Homeland Security promised to halt non-criminal immigration enforcement in the affected media. But, according to BuzzFeed News, Trump's immigration forces continued to round up non-criminal, undocumented immigrants right up until Irma hit Florida. For 4 days after the statement was issued, U.S. officials with U.S. Customs and Border Protection in Florida continued to take undocumented immigrants into custody, changing little in the agency's local day-to-day operations as the state braced for the oncoming Category 4 storm. The Customs and Border Protection officials told BuzzFeed that though priorities shifted to focus on life-saving operations in the days before Irma made landfall. Immigration enforcement actions and arrests continued until September 10th, 4 days after DHS issued its statement pledging that such activity had ceased. Well, these guys never tell the truth. Now, Timothy continues here, this news is disturbing on a moral level, but it is also dangerous. The main reason for the announcement was to ensure that undocumented immigrants and their families would not have to fear deportation if they sought safety during the deadly storm that would go on to claim 33 lives. And I should add, it's not the so-called illegals. It's not the undocumented only that we have to worry about. It's anybody who happens to be brown. But in the wake of this callous bait and switch during future natural disasters, many people may choose to lie low and face the danger of a massive storm rather than put themselves at the mercy or lack thereof of their federal government. Not that Trump is overly concerned with them. He's far too busy about the bank accounts of his billionaire friends and donors, deceiving immigrants and luring them into a deportation trap during a time of great need and fear is a stunningly heartless move, but sadly, this kind of attack is par for the course for the Trump White House. All right, let's go ahead and get ready for our break, and we'll move everything back to the chef's table and continue with a deep dive into Joan Didion. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Sam Rayburn, a legendary Speaker of the U.S. House in the 1940s and 50s, offered this piece of ethical advice for lawmakers who were conflicted over whether to vote for the people or the lobbyists. Every now and then, he said, a politician ought to do something just because it's right. Wow, ethics! How quaint. Today's House Speaker, Paul Ryan, has perverted Rayburn's ethics, advising his Republican majority to vote for anything just because it's right-wing. Along with Donald Trump and Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, Ryan is now trying to push America's tax law so far to the right that it's horribly wrong. Tax proposals can be complex, but this 429-page monster is shockingly easy to understand. The Trump-Ryan-McConnell triumvirate intends to take money from millions of working families and give it to the world's wealthiest people and richest multinational corporations. Of course, when they talk publicly about their proposal, they claim it's all about helping you working stiffs. It's, quote, real tax reform for everyday hard-working Americans, trumpeted our president. In private, though, they reveal to their biggest campaign donors that the plan lets them help themselves to the people's money, giving these corporate elites a huge windfall. The biggest ever, bragged Trump. In fact, the 400 richest families in America would average $5.5 million in new tax breaks. Meanwhile, if your income is under $75,000 a year, you'll end up worse off. This is Jim Hightower saying, forget trickle-down economics. The GOP is practicing tinkle-down economics. Why would they push such an evil, shameful policy? Because it's not you common voters they care about. It's the moneyed elites who fund their re-election campaigns. As one Republican pusher of this tax giveaway to the rich put it, my donors are basically saying, get it done or don't ever call me again.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
Let's talk about when cops are robbers. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. We're talking about civil asset forfeiture. Civil, because 81% of the persons whose property is being seized by law enforcement are never charged with any crime. And you have no right to a lawyer. Go hire one if you can. And there's no presumption of innocence. And indeed, the burden is on you, not the government, to prove that your property is innocent. Asset, meaning anything of value. A cell phone, a car, a house, a piece of jewelry. Forfeiture, meaning the government seizes your property and you never get it back. Here's how it works. Some law enforcement agency claims that the property, unbeknownst to you, is, was, or has been at some time connected with some crime, and voila, the property now belongs to the government. Generally, the money from the sale of the forfeited assets is then poured into police coffers, so they, not surprisingly, love civil asset forfeiture, as does Attorney General Jeff Sessions. To be sure, 8 states, Maine, Maryland, New Mexico, Missouri, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, and Vermont, prohibit the police from keeping the money or sharing it with the feds. But it's time, it's way past time, for the other states and the federal government to end civil asset forfeiture unless and until there has been a criminal conviction in which it has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the asset played a part. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. The Russian parliament is debating whether to bar American journalists from the building after state-funded TV outlet RT lost its press pass on Capitol Hill in D.C. RT had its access to the Capitol cut after the network registered as a foreign agent. Media outlets increasingly find themselves trapped amid sour U.S.-Russian relations. Last weekend, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a law allowing the country to brand 9 American news outlets funded by the U.S. government, including Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, as foreign agents. UN efforts to kickstart Syrian peace talks appear to have failed again. Members of the Syrian government had been meeting this week in Geneva, Switzerland, alongside opposition figures. But on Friday, Syrian government representatives walked out, saying it was absurd for their counterparts to demand President Assad's removal from office. The UN wants the peace talks to run through December 15th, but Syria's UN ambassador says it's unclear if the government will return to the negotiating table in the coming days. And Tesla founder Elon Musk is taking a victory lap this week as a new Tesla power storage facility plant was flicked on for the first time in Australia. Southern Australia had been experiencing rolling blackouts in recent years, and some lawmakers chalked up the problem to unpredictable wind and solar power. But Musk disagreed and said Australia needed his power-storing batteries, and he promised to build the world's largest lithium-ion battery farm within 100 days, or else it would be free. Surprise, the plant was built ahead of schedule. At an unveiling ceremony, South Australia's Premier, Jay Weatherill, said the facility and its flexibility could be a model for the world.
We stand tall on the world stage, exercising the function of leadership in relation to renewable energy, and we're very proud of it, and the nation should be proud of it.
For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com. All right, folks, thank you for sticking with us. This is West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we have moved everything back to the chef's table, and I am your chef, Justice Putnam, dishing up a cornucopia of abundance. That's right, folks, a cornucopia of abundance. There's always more here on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Why don't we get into, well, local weather and world weather around the world? currently here in the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon. It is currently 31 degrees. That sounds like freezing. And we're going to get a high of 47. We did have rain over the weekend, and it got cold enough last night, of course, at 31. If there was moisture in the sky, it could turn to ice, and sometimes called snow. And it did feel like there were snowflakes falling last night when I was out looking at the supermoon. Yep, but we do not have any rain in the forecast for today or for the next several days, so I might be able to get one last mowing in and then let it go for the rest of the winter. That's what I'm hoping for. Pressure is a little high at 30.49 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles. Humidity at 84%. Air quality index is only good at 20 parts per million. I'd like it to be less than that, but that's because I have a mom with breathing problems. Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they have purchased, and these people live around the world. Well, for some reason on River City Hash Monday, the weather from around the world is on a glitch. I'm able to tell you that London is 49 degrees and cloudy, San Francisco is 50 and clear, and New York is 43 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that's all of the weather from around the world brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people live around the world. All right, so why don't you get comfortable here at the chef's table, and we'll dive into this article by Paul Gleason in the criticism section of the philosophical magazine, The Point. In her famous essays on the 60s and 70s, Joan Didion surveyed a society on the verge of a nervous breakdown. In the past 2 years, critics looking to visit this period and to reassess Didion's career have not lacked for chances. There has been an unauthorized biography, a new book, South and West, which includes Didion's unpublished notebooks on a road trip through the South in 1970, the Patty Hearst trial in 1976, and most recently, a documentary, The Center Will Not Hold, directed by her nephew, Griffin Dunn. The responses have been mixed, and not only because the biography offered little in the way of news, and the documentary was about as hard-hitting as a holiday card, the new treatments seem to have raised as many questions as they have answered about Didion's legacy. What exactly was she trying to say? Everyone admires the prose. Generations of journalists and essayists have tried to write like Didion writes and see like Didion sees. That spare yet somehow luminous style, recording the impressions of the acutely sensitive but pitiless eye. Her political meaning, however, remains obscure. Some, like Vox's Elisa Wilkinson, watch our own political center falling apart and, quote, can't shake the feeling that we ought to have been listening to Joan Didion more carefully all along, end quote. Others pass over her criticisms of 60s social movements in polite silence, or accuse her of quietism, if not downright stupidity. Writing in Book Forum, Sarah Nicole Prickett acknowledges Didion can give you the impression that no one else does see what Didion sees, and yet, according to Prickett, when Didion sees something dubious about the overarching narrative of the women's movement, she is out of her intellectual range. I should mention here that this is a guy mansplaining about Joan Didion, and I'm a guy reading a guy mansplaining it. Boy, no wonder Didion wrote the way that she did. Didion's journalism from the 60s and 70s seems newly relevant because then as now, American history has taken a few alarming turns and everyone wanted to know why and what to do about it. While crossing the nation on book tour, she heard the same question from every TV and radio host. Where are we heading? Today, the questions remain the same. Why is this happening, and what can we do to change it? But Didion regarded answers to these questions with skepticism, bordering on contempt. At the heart of grand narratives about who we are and where we are heading, she saw self-deception in the face of meaningless disorder. Instead of trying to change the world, Didion was content, as she writes in South and West, to find out, as usual, what was making the picture in my mind. In order to see what was in front of her at the present moment, she had to doubt the stories in the air around her, starting with her own. Didion was born in 1934 and spent most of her childhood in Sacramento, the state's capital, in the heart of its long Central Valley. Her mother belonged to a prominent local family. Her father was a successful, hard-drinking real estate man. The whole family preached a genteel pioneer ethic: self-sufficiency, wealth from the land, loyalty to family and community, distrust of government and newcomers, thrift in the form of faded drapes and silver, membership in exclusive social clubs, and the Episcopalian Church. If her grandfather spotted a rattlesnake while driving, she recalled in her memoir, he would stop his car and go into the brush after it. To do otherwise would imperil the next traveler and thereby violate the code of the West. Combining staunch individualism with a sense of noblesse oblige, the family despised Kennedy and voted Goldwater, as did Didion in 1964. They based their code on the West on a particular story about the state's past and their place in it. According to family lore, Didion's great-great-great-grandfather and other pioneers had crossed the Sierras, mined the gold, dammed the rivers, built the cities, and made the Central Valley bloom, all on the strength of their unshakable conviction that they could make of their lives and the land exactly what they wanted. Didion dutifully repeated this story in an 8th grade graduation speech. California had been settled not by the self-satisfied, happy, and content people, but by the adventurous, the restless, and the daring, she proclaimed. We can't stop and become satisfied and content. We must live up to our heritage, go on to better and greater things for California. This was supposed to be the story of her life, a story of progress and dreams fulfilled, but by the time she wrote the California Notes section of South and West in 1976, Didion doubted every part of it. I have lived most of my life, she realized, under misapprehensions of one kind or another. This was supposed to be, on closer inspection, a story that then fell apart on every level. Her father was not a snake-slaying pioneer, but a real estate speculator. While he inveighed against government regulation and internal migrants, the family livelihood depended on both. Likewise, the men and women who had supposedly built California with nothing but grit and guts had in fact relied heavily on federal largesse in the form of land grants, which they then profited on by selling at all to newcomers at an inflated rate, and nature, far from being conquered, kept avenging itself. Pioneers and settlers died of exposure and starvation. Crops failed. Cities burned. Dams and levees burst. The real history of California was not heroic self-sufficiency, but predatory greed and sky-high hopes brought suddenly and disastrously low. The family story was not just incidentally misleading. Didion came to see its factual inaccuracy served a purpose. In its promise of self-realization, of a sense of meaning and control, It pretended to bridge the unbridgeable gap that always stretches between our dreams and our ability to realize them. Didion's father had occasional attacks of tension and needed to be hospitalized for his own safety. Her mother's refined domestic facade occasionally slipped. She would burst into tears and say, "What difference does it make?" Belief in the heroic potential of the pioneer spirit started to look pathological, like an effort to beat back what Didion later called some deep apprehension of meaninglessness. Didion's confidence in her story collapsed in the late 60s. She described those years as a time when I began to doubt the premises of all the stories I'd ever told myself. As the premises of her stories fell through, making sense of anything became next to impossible. I was supposed to have a script, and I had mislaid it. I was supposed to hear cues, and I no longer did. I was meant to know the plot, but all I knew was what I saw. Flash pictures in variable sequence, images with no meaning beyond their temporary arrangement. Not a movie, but a cutting room floor experience. In 1968, she had a mental breakdown. In the title essay of the White Album, Didion insists that her cutting room experience had clued her into something about the stories people live by. We live entirely, especially if we are writers, by the imposition of a narrative line upon disparate images, by the ideas with which we have learned to freeze the shifting phantasmagoria, which is our actual experience. Her disillusionment with her own story, it seems, positioned her especially well to see through the self-deception of others. In the rest of the collection, Didion charted the distance between American self-conceptions and the realities of their lives. In her essays, young mothers abandon their infants at the interstate, or, unable to attain the lifestyles they expected, murder their husbands. JCs wonder if campus JC clubs are the answer to student unrest. An Episcopalian bishop rejects the divinity of Christ and chases the historical Jesus into the desert where he dies of thirst. The national media treats the hippie lifestyle as a social statement, while the runaways and small-time drug dealers in the Haight-Ashbury district can't tell the difference between militant anarchists and the John Birch Society. JCs and the Episcopal bishop make easy targets for Didion's acid irony. Of course, the upheavals of the late 60s threw respectable people like them into confusion. But Didion also criticized the wishful thinking of left-wing reformers and radicals. Not only do Hollywood liberals understand politics in cliched story arcs, but they believe they can impose those arcs on American history. Things happen in motion pictures. There is always a resolution, always a strong cause, effect, dramatic line. Always a strong cause and effect, dramatic line. And to perceive the world in those terms is to assume an ending for every social scenario. I would argue it's not the liberals in Hollywood that are, and I want to say this is both sidisms, but let us remember the moral police of the industry from about its inception. And I wouldn't call them the liberal elite by any means. Now, in Didion's mind, the person who best exemplifies this faith in transformative power of the right story is the novelist Doris Lessing. Lessing, wrote Didion, possessed a determinedly utopian and distinctly teleological bent assaulted at every turn by fresh evidence that the world is not exactly improving as promised. Political parties, Freudian determinism, the women's movement, the right story should have led to some control over history, but never did. In Lessing's search, Didion thought she detected the guiding delusion of her time, and perhaps not only her time. The belief in a new pristine society, first dreamt of and then realized through sheer force of will, lies deep in the American psyche. from its Puritan-founding myth of California's resettlement to Oneida, Woodstock, and every Silicon Valley scheme to cast the past aside and live a perfect state of freedom. Didion regarded such narratives most of the time with bemused detachment, but sometimes she viewed them with alarm, as in her infamous article, The Women's Movement. That movement, too, tells a grand story. It names women as an oppressed class and hopes to remake society by bringing this class to consciousness. Didion acknowledges that women are victims of condensation and exploitation, but she refused to identify with an imagined every woman, supposedly helpless before a rogues gallery of school teachers, advertisers, employers, doctors, and libidinous dates who turned into equally libidinous husbands. The movement's slogan, "The personal is political," struck Didion as a special kind of threat, since it imposed a sentimental storyline not only on her public life, but also, and even more troublingly, on her private affairs. When Shulamith Firestone suggested that artificial wombs could eliminate the inequity inherent in pregnancy, she offended Didion's apprehension of what it is like to be a woman, the irreconcilable difference of it, the sense of living one's deepest life underwater. That dark involvement with blood and birth and death could now be declared invalid, unnecessary. One never felt it at all. In each story about the world reborn, Didion detected a motive familiar from her childhood. The frantic activity of a young communist reminds Didion of her family's effort to beat back a sense of dread. From the California dream to Marxism, elaborate systems of thought promise order and meaning in a chaotic and meaningless world. Underneath the social chaos of the 60s was the instability of nature, implacable, indifferent, ever-changing, and all but designed to frustrate our plans. In South and West, Didion goes to the Patty Hearst trial to figure out where California and the nation were going, but finally concludes, at the center of this story there is a terrible secret, a kernel of cyanide, and the secret is that the story doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference, doesn't figure. The snow still falls in the Sierra. The Pacific still trembles in its bowl. The great tectonic plates strain against each other while we sleep and wake. Over time, Didion realized the myth of the West was Janus-based. On one side was the heroic pioneer, capable of bending the landscape to his will. On the other was the lonesome wanderer, who could appreciate her insignificance on a geological scale. In a review of Norman Mailer's The Executioner song, Didion applauded Mailer for capturing the vast emptiness at the center of the Western experience, a nihilism antithetical not only to literature, but to most other forms of human endeavor, a dread so close to zero that human voices fade out, trail off like skywriting, she wrote. But those voices don't disappear immediately. As she read Mailer's novel, Didion also remembered that the tracks made by the wagon wheels are still visible, and they form the air over Utah, like the footprints made on the moon. Even if the traveler could not control the world, she could leave a lasting record of her solitary passage through it. Now, I might argue some of us call that leaving our trash behind to prove that we were there. We did it on the moon. We must have been there. Look at all the trash we left. Didion received this half of the Western mythos, like its more heroic elements, from her mother, who first gave her a notebook and told her to write down what she saw and felt. The purpose was to remember what it was to be me. That was always the point. Fierce loyalty to her own experience entailed being at odds with what others said it ought to be, but it also laid the foundation of her aesthetic vision. Didion admires the modernist painter Georgia O'Keeffe because O'Keeffe is simply hard, a straight shooter, a woman clean of received wisdom and open to what she sees. When critics offered their own interpretations of O'Keeffe's painting of flowers, she rebuked them. I made you take time to look at what I saw, and you hung all your associations with flowers on my flower and write about my flower as if I think and see what you think and see, and I don't. Didion likewise connected her openness to experience to her refusal of received ideas. In an essay titled Why I Write, she traced her preference for the concrete over the abstract to her student days at the University of California at Berkeley. She could never stay focused on the intricacies of Marxist dialectics or any other great system of thought, she recalled. Instead, her attention would inevitably turn to something like a flowering pear tree outside my window and the particular way the petals fell on my floor. If she meditates on these images for long enough, they reveal their own unique grammar. She insists on taking the word grammar literally. All I know about grammar is its infinite power. To shift the structure of a sentence alters the meaning of that sentence as definitively and inflexibly as the position of a camera alters the meaning of an object photographed. The arrangement of the words matter, and the arrangement you want to be found in the picture in your mind. The picture dictates the arrangement. With our master narratives, we attempt to impose order on our ever-shifting perceptions of an ever-shifting world. Petals falling to the floor, snow falling in the Sierras. Didion wants to write in the exact opposite way. Nota bene. The picture tells you. You don't tell it. Perhaps Didion's singular journalistic vision, her ability to capture and communicate the shifting phantasmagoria of her experience, depended on her skepticism about political storytelling. Perhaps it was her incredulity that made her the perfect journalist for the 60s and early 70s, when the old stories were falling apart and the new ones had yet to meet the rough ground of reality. Her politics eventually moved left. She registered as a Democrat after Republicans fell for Ronald Reagan's Country Western Act, but she never became a believer. At the end of South and West, Didion describes the California landscape. It seems to give her the contentment she had disdained in her middle school graduation speech. I am at home in the West. The hills of the coastal ranges look right to me. The particular flat expanse of the Central Valley comforts my eye, she wrote. I can pronounce the names of rivers and recognize the common trees and snakes. I am easy here in a way that I am not easy in other places. And that's what landscape does, folks. All right, let's close up here at the chef's table and clean up West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy so that we can get ready for tomorrow. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesday. Oh, yes, that's the daily special for tomorrow. So stay tuned for some great content on Netroots Radio, 24/7, 365. And we'll see you tomorrow. And West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.